Balita mula sa Pilipinas. In a nation grappling constantly with drug-related issues, how really crucial are the procedural safeguards within our justice system?
That's a huge question, and it leads right into what happens when those safeguards maybe get overlooked.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially in those high-profile cases everyone's watching. Could a small oversight, seemingly minor, in handling evidence actually cause a conviction to be overturned by the Supreme Court?
It certainly could, and it makes you wonder about the balance, right, between enforcing the law and protecting individual rights here in the Philippines.
That's spot on, and it's precisely that intersection we're diving into today. We're looking at a recent Supreme Court case.
Real drug charges, and also an alleged drug den. The evidence handling really became the core issue.
So our mission for this deep dive is to, really get into the details of this ruling. We'll look at the facts, the legal arguments,
The reasoning behind the justice's decision.
and pull out the key takeaways. What does this tell us about how the justice system here handles these kinds of offenses?
The specific case is People of the Philippines versus Michael Andanar y Siendo alias Tacogag and Mary Jane Garbo y Mariposque.
Right, GR numb 246284, decided June 16th, 2021, and it reviewed that Court of Appeals decision from June 2017.
Which had actually agreed with the initial trial court conviction.
Okay, so let's set the scene. What were the alleged facts?
Well, this goes back to July 28, 2010, happened in Taguig City, Metro Manila.
Okay.
Michael Andanar was charged with 2 counts of violating Section 5 of RA 9165. That's the illegal sale of dangerous drugs part.
2 counts.
Yes. First one, criminal case number 17220, involved allegedly selling .07 grams of shabu, tiny amount,
Wow.
to an undercover police officer, a poseur buyer, for 500 pesos.
And a second count.
Criminal case 17221, allegedly selling another, even smaller quantity of shabu to someone else, a guy named Moriel Gutierrez, alias Patok.
Okay.
This supposedly happened while the same undercover officer was there, also for 500 pesos.
And then there was Mary Jane Garbo. What was her charge?
She was charged under Section 6 of the same law, illegal maintenance of a den, dive, or resort.
So running a drug den, essentially.
Basically, yeah. The claim was her house was used for storing, selling, or using drugs regularly, and that drug paraphernalia was found there too.
And what happened with the other person involved, Moriel Gutierrez?
The case against him was actually dismissed. Sadly, he passed away during the proceedings.
I see. So Andanar and Garbo, what do they plead?
Both pleaded not guilty when they were arraigned.
But there were some things agreed upon before trial, weren't there? Stipulations.
Yes, exactly. Both sides agreed on, the basic identities of the accused, that the trial court had jurisdiction, and crucially, that the lab report, physical science report number D26010S, confirmed the seized stuff was positive for shabu, amphetamine hydrochloride.
Okay, so everyone agreed it was shabu. Then it went to the regional trial court. What was the verdict there?
The RTC decision came down on May 19, 2016. They found Andanar guilty, beyond reasonable doubt, on both counts of selling drugs.
And the sentence.
Pretty heavy. Life imprisonment for each count, plus a fine of 500,000 pesos for each. So 2 life sentences, 1,000,000 pesos in fines.
Wow. And Garbo.
She was also found guilty, beyond reasonable doubt, for maintaining the drug den. Her sentence was 12 years and 1 day, plus a 100,000 peso fine.
What was the trial court's reasoning? How did they justify the conviction?
They basically put full faith in what the police officers testified, believed their version of events.
Okay.
They also found that the chain of custody, tracking the drugs, was properly established. They dismissed the defense claims of innocence or frame-up.
So a clear win for the prosecution at the trial level. But Andanar and Garbo appealed.
They did. They took it to the Court of Appeals. Their main arguments were that the prosecution hadn't actually proven all the necessary elements for the crimes.
Like what?
Well, they pointed to procedural issues during the buy-bust, like no insulating witnesses. Those independent observers were present during the inventory and photos.
Oh.
And that the inventory and photos happened at the police station, not right there at the scene. They also questioned why the person who received the drugs at the crime lab wasn't presented in court.
So procedural gaps, essentially. How did the government respond, the OSG?
The Office of the Solicitor General pushed back. They insisted the elements were proven and that the police had, quote, substantially complied with the chain of custody rules.
Substantially comply. Okay.
And they relied on that old standard, the presumption of regularity in the performance of official duties. Basically, assume the cops did their job right unless proven otherwise.
And the Court of Appeals, what did they decide?
On June 23, 2017, the CA sided with the trial court. They affirmed the convictions, agreed with the OSG.
Which brings us to the Supreme Court, the final stop. What was the core issue they had to tackle?
Fundamentally, it was. Did the Court of Appeals make a mistake in upholding those convictions? Was the guilty verdict for Andanar and Garbo correct given everything?
Let's break down the Supreme Court's ruling then, starting with Andanar and the illegal sale charges.
Right. The SC looked at RA 9165, specifically the version before the 2014 amendments. Section 21 was key.
That's the section on handling seized drugs, right?
Exactly. It spells out the procedure. And together with DDB Regulation Number 1 from 2002, it defines the chain of custody.
Which is?
Essentially, the documented, authorized movement of the drugs. From seizure to handling to lab, all the way to court presentation. It's about ensuring integrity.
And the drug itself is the corpus delicti.
Precisely. The body of the crime. The prosecution must prove, beyond reasonable doubt, that the drug shown in court is the exact same one seized. No gaps, no doubts.
And did the Supreme Court find issues with that proof?
Oh, yes. Several critical problems. First, the venue for the inventory and photos.
Where it happened.
Yeah. It wasn't done immediately at the place of arrest. It was done later at the police station.
Why did the police say they did that?
They claimed a crowd was gathering, making it unsafe or impractical. But the Supreme Court, referencing an older case, People v. Dumanjug, basically said, that's not good enough.
So inconvenience isn't a valid excuse?
Not usually, no. Not for bypassing a specific legal requirement like that.
Okay, what was the second major issue?
This was a big one. The absence of the insulating witnesses.
Those independent observers again. The DOJ, media, elected official.
Exactly. They weren't there when the inventory and photos were taken. And crucially, the prosecution didn't offer a justifiable reason why not.
They didn't explain their absence or show they tried to get them.
Nope. The SC pointed to cases like People v. Lim and People v. Ramos, stressing that you must explain their absence and show you made earnest efforts to comply. It's not just optional.
So another break-in procedure. Anything else?
Yes. A gap after the drugs got to the crime lab, the prosecution didn't show who handled the drugs once they arrived.
So we know who delivered them.
Right. SPO2 Antolon and PO3 Del Rosario delivered them. But the officer who received them at the lab, PO2 and Manuel, wasn't put on the witness stand.
Another missing link. The SC cited a case for that too.
Yeah, People v. Burdeos. It highlights the need to account for every step.
Were there problems with how the drugs were handled after testing too?
Apparently so. The SC noted a lack of evidence on how the drugs were stored, handled post-examination, and even how they got from the lab to the courtroom for the trial, citing People v. Baltazar on that point.
It seems like the chain had several weak or missing links.
Definitely. And one more thing related to the lab, the stipulation about the forensic chemist's testimony.
The agreement to skip having the chemist testify in person.
Right. The court found it insufficient. It didn't confirm crucial details.
Like what?
Like, did the chemist receive the drugs properly marked and sealed? Did they reseal it after testing? Did they put their own markings on it? The stipulation was silent on these vital points.
Citing People v. Miranda and Cabohay here, the court said you need those details if the chemist isn't testifying directly.
Absolutely. You need that assurance of integrity, especially when relying on a written report or stipulation.
So putting all those issues together, what was the conclusion for Andanar?
The Supreme Court concluded that because of all these failures, the improper venue, the missing witnesses, the gaps in handling at the lab and beyond, the weak stipulation the prosecution failed.
Failed to prove.
Failed to establish the identity and the unbroken chain of custody of the drugs with moral certainty. Basically, they couldn't be sure the drugs in court were the same ones seized.
And the result?
Acquittal. Michael Andanar was acquitted on both counts of illegal sale. The CA decision was reversed for him.
Okay, a major turnaround. Now what about Mary Jane Garbo and the charge of maintaining a drug den?
For that charge, the SC laid out the elements. You need to prove, 1, the place is a den, meaning drugs are regularly used, sold, stored, whatever, there.
Regularity is key.
Yes. And 2, that the accused maintains it, runs it, controls it. Just finding drugs isn't enough.
So did the prosecution prove those elements against Garbo?
The Supreme Court said no. They found the evidence lacking.
How so?
Well, PO2 Antolon's testimony, the undercover officer, only really proved that one alleged drug sale involving Gutierrez happened there.
An isolated incident, potentially?
Exactly. It didn't show regular selling or use by multiple customers, which is needed to establish it as a den. The court cited People v. Galicia for this point.
Was there any other evidence, like its reputation in the neighborhood?
No, nothing like that was presented. No evidence of the house having a general reputation as a drug spot.
What about the claim that Gutierrez was seen using shabu inside?
The court was skeptical. They called it an assumption by the witness. There were no lab results presented to confirm Gutierrez had actually used drugs.
So no objective proof of drug use.
Right. And even if he had used drugs there once, the court reiterated, a single instance doesn't make a residence a drug den. You need that pattern, that regularity.
So the evidence just wasn't strong enough to meet the definition of a drug den.
Correct. That, combined with the already compromised integrity of the drugs allegedly found there due to the chain of custody issues,
meant Garbo was also acquitted.
Yes. The Supreme Court acquitted Mary Jane Garbo as well. The prosecution failed to prove her guilt beyond reasonable doubt.
So the final outcome, both convictions overturned.
Both overturned. The court reversed the Court of Appeals and ordered the immediate release of both Andanar and Garbo unless they were being held for some other lawful reason.
Wow. That's quite a significant ruling. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Reflecting on this, what does the court's strict stance on following these procedures, particularly the chain of custody, tell you about priorities in drug cases?
It's a constant tension, isn't it? Does this decision strike the right balance? Is it protecting rights effectively, or maybe making it too hard to prosecute drug offenses? Where does that line fall?
That's the million-peso question, really. We'd genuinely love to hear what you, our listeners, think. What are your takeaways from this decision?
Yeah, definitely share your thoughts in the comments below. What aspects stood out to you? And hey, if you found this deep dive insightful, give us a favorite.
Before we finish up, let's quickly recap those key legal doctrines that this case really brought to the forefront.
Good idea. First, obviously, the chain of custody. Remember, that's the documented trail showing the drugs weren't tampered with from seizure to court. Super critical.
Second, the insulating witnesses. That mandatory presence of media, DOJ, and an elected official during inventory and photos. It's about transparency.
And if they're absent, the police have to provide a solid reason and prove they tried to get them there. It's not just a suggestion.
Third, the corpus delicti in drug cases. That's the drug itself. The prosecution must prove the item in court is the exact same one seized. No doubt allowed.
Fourth, the elements of a legal sale. You need the transaction, buyer, seller, the drug, and the payment, all proven.
And finally, the elements of illegal maintenance of a drug den. Needs proof the place is regularly used for drug activities and the accused maintains it. Isolated incidents aren't enough.
Understanding these doctrines really helps frame why the court ruled the way it did.
Absolutely. And if you want to stay informed, get these kinds of deeper understandings of significant legal cases and their impact here in the Philippines, please make sure you subscribe to our channel.
Yeah, we go beyond just the headlines to give you that in-depth analysis.
So hit that subscribe button now. Don't miss our next deep dive into the critical issues shaping our nation.